Welcome everyone to the first edition of the SDG Action Conclave 2020, and we are conducting today's session focusing on SDG Goal 12, that is responsible consumption and production. Let me give you a brief about our initiative. The Youth Forum is a project under the Alexis Society, and our team consists of inspired young students and professionals who are solely interested in creating positive social impact by conducting research on policy issues, writing thought-provoking and insightful blogs, designing creative social campaigns, organizing life-changing events, and interviewing leaders and change makers. As it is correctly said that the youth are not only the leaders of tomorrow, but the partners of today. So we at Youth Forum, a team of creative and encouraging individuals with a shared mission, a mission to change the world. So through this first edition of the SDG Action Conclave, we wish to bring together the change makers and the leaders from around the globe under the Act for SDGs campaign week of the United Nations. It will help to prepare an actionable agenda that will aid all in achieving sustainable development goals through all the initiatives and more. While the world leaders meet virtually at the United Nations General Assembly to take up the trying issues and give a solution to the tough times, we are trying to do a small bit by taking action and raising awareness and initiating a better direction ahead. The turning point of the people and of the planet needs to be now. Let me introduce to you the speaker, Ma'am Ann Rosenberg. She is a Denmark native but a global citizen based in New York and has 25 years of experience in the corporate world working with sustainability and purpose. She is a mentor at UN Global Compact SDG Young Innovators Program. She is the global lead for She Innovates in collaboration with UN Women to drive industry-wide action to make innovation and technology work better for young women and girls. Some of her affiliations include UN Women Global Innovation Coalition for Change, MIT Solve member, the Female Quotient, Acon's Acoin Cryptocurrency Foundation, to name a few. Some of the titles and awards that she has received includes Top 25 Most Influential Women in Blockchain 2017, Innovation Fellow October 2017, World Summit on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Honorary Doctor Delaware State University December of 2015, on account of bringing young people from all over the world to showcase their talents to Fortune 500 companies and change their lives. She encourages all students everywhere to put their passion to work, to dream dreams and create the impossible. She uses the tools of innovation like a magic wand in the corporate world. Her ideas and capacities are limitless in creating novel, innovative avenues. She's a change maker and introduces much needed cultural updates to the society. Greetings to you, ma'am. We're very pleased to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to introduce to you the chair. So Kunal Mandal is the co-founder of GameSpace, a gamification company which uses quizzes and other games as a tool for personal growth and people engagement, and citybitesindia.com, a travel portal which helps travelers discover and book inspiring city experiences provided by local experts. Currently, he is on a mission to teach curiosity as a life skill, increase awareness about sustainability, and empower young Indians to be more than what they thought they could be. So to take forward discussions while trying to arrive at solutions through this session on SDG 12, I would like to hand over the conduct to Mr. Kunal, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Arushi, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you who is joining in and listening in. I have a very, very special guest for today's session, and I have the beautiful and brilliant Ann Rosenberg with me. Ann, a very warm welcome to you as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Ann was kind of looking at your journey, and I noticed that you recently co-founded and launched together with UN Global Compact the SDG Ambition, which challenges and supports companies in being more strategic and transformative in how they run their businesses. I would like to know more about this initiative and some of the major problems that you're faced, because I realized that you launched it early this year, and then the pandemic happened. So how are you sort of striving through those challenges? And tell us a little bit about the initiative.
Thank you so much. So the SDG Ambition actually was, you could say, the ideation of the SDG Ambition actually came last summer after the High Political Forum, where Lisa Kinku, the former CEO of UN Global Compact, and I came together, and we could see that the 17 global goals was not really improved. All the reports after the High Political Forum in 2019 showed that So we came together and we kind of looked into say, why is that? And we could see that even though the companies are putting into the vision mission statement that they want to be sustainable, and they put it into their like go-to-market and advertisement, they don't really at that point had started really to incorporate it into the way they build their business model, or how they run their supply chain or procurement processes, like the backbone of the company. And another thing is also that the 17 global goals are mainly created for governments and countries, so not so much for the private sector, why it is also have been difficult for the private sector really to implement the 17 global goals. So the SDG Ambition is really created for the private sector. It consists of 3 guides and a number of supporting documents. And the last guide actually just came out this week at the General Assembly. But the first guide came out beginning of the year, where we were at Davos, and the Secretary General launched it. And this is really the methodology on how to implement and make sure that a company becomes sustainable across the entire business, from strategy to the operation to the go-to-markets and stakeholder management. The second guide is actually 10 business benchmarks that is a translation of the 17 global goals for the private sector. And the last guide is actually a guide that takes the business benchmark and the metrics and integrate it into business processes, process steps underlying enterprise architecture. It's actually how do you then implement it. So it's super exciting, and there's a huge interest for the SDG Ambition. And UN Global Compact have more than 30,000 members around the world in 70 chapters. So right now, the whole SDG Ambition are being mobilized and rolled out to the private sector. You then asked, so in context of COVID, and in context of COVID, you can say the SDG Ambition are really supporting the acceleration and awareness in the private sector that we have now because of COVID, the importance of being a sustainable company. Whenever we talk about the climate situation, or the issue we have around gender equality, or the issues that we have about waste, or any kind of industry across the world have around sustainability. So the SDG Ambition is like a framework and a support for the private sector to become sustainable.
Wow, that's really, really important, because I think the goal that we are essentially focusing on this conference is about responsible consumption and production. And of course, companies have a huge role to play in that. And I'm glad that the ambitious project that you call SDG Ambition is going to lead us there through applicable framework, other different facets of that you mentioned. I mean, it really looks like that Global Compact is going to have an impact. So glad we can start on that positive note. And I mean, your career and writing is something that's deeply inspiring. And one of the things that I found was this publication called Science Fiction, a Starship for Enterprise Innovation. And you talked about redefining winning. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that is, and how did it come to you, and how corporates or startups or even government institutions can go beyond the typical commercial scorekeeping and probably redefine winning and work towards SDG?
So, and I'm smiling when we talk about this, because it actually been a journey for me. For around 8 years ago, I moved to Silicon Valley, and what I see in Silicon Valley is what I call Innovation 1.0, where you see the collaboration between universities, Stanford, Berkeley, the university landscape, corporations, startup accelerators, and governments and the private sector. And of course, this is not only in Silicon Valley. So that's where I looked at Innovation 2.0, is where you, of course, have those innovation landscapes all over the world that have been part of mapping out. But then I came to the point, I kind of said, okay, we innovate a lot, but what is the bigger purpose behind innovation? And this is where, when I came to New York and started working with UN, we do it, of course, to make sure we can reach the global goals for the better of humanity. That's really the reason why we need innovation. And then I kind of thought that now I get it, right? You have exponential technologies, the mindset of the innovation mindset, and you do it to create a better world for everybody. But then I realized that to do that, you need really big ideas. You need transformational ideas. And that is where I begin to look into science fiction and realize that, and this is what the book is about that you refer to, is actually, it turned out to become a history book. And I call it Innovation 4.0, where I actually end going 100 years back in time. And there is actually a pattern that showed that we tend to come up with amazing ideas without knowing how we create those ideas. And this is what you see in sci-fi movies and sci-fi novels. And then they suddenly become real. You build it, right? Star Trek's the flip phone. You can mention so many parallels between old science fiction movies and that they suddenly realize today. So the book conclude actually and say that science fiction, sorry for people who love movies and novels about science fiction, is not only created for that, it's created for the time we are in right now, where we have technology at hand that can do more than we even understand. And to unlock that potential, you need the science fiction mindset. So it is actually a methodology framework, science fiction, to unlock great ideas to reach the global goals. And it's written for the private sector. And it is actually for the private sector to use, so they can like go in and say, how will 2030 look like? How will 2050 look like? How are we going to solve the big issues that we see around climate or the ocean and so on and so forth. So thank you for bringing that up. Everybody have a sci-fi inside themselves, and it's time to activate it now to come up with great new ideas for the world.
That's, as you rightfully probably need the science fiction mindset more than ever, because can visualize succeeding with the SDGs in that 10 years with the science fiction, then we will be able to do it. Because it's all about visualizing and then sort of act little steps towards that visualization. So I'm glad that a little bit more about the science fiction mindset in general, like what is a framework that you would probably give today's startups, entrepreneurs who are listening in, that they can probably try to implement it in their business right now?
I think first of all, as a startup, and that's also what we see in the startup scene, and part of the work that I'm also involved in today is really to guide the next generation startups. Because we did have a time where we built great solutions, but it was not always done to support the purpose, right? So you can say whatever you are, big corporations or you're a startup, anything you build today need to have sustainability as a core. So that's the first thing for the startup world. Second is that, and I think COVID have shown us that, because we all live more or less in a science fiction world right now. Nobody had envisioned this situation we are in, and you also see how we accelerate on new innovations more than ever right now. People are even talking about that the technology have fast-tracked with what have happened within technology for the last half year is what we normally have seen in a 5-year time frame, right? So I think as a startup today, make sure what you build is sustainable and have sustainable in mind. Map it up to the 10 business benchmarks and the 17 global goals. Secondly, it is important that, and this is a new thinking that I'm bringing in here, called the share of life. Share of life is about how we lived on farms, and then we lived in cities, and now we live online. And living online means that the product that you create or the solution that you define are going to be created in a new way to reach audiences, to reach the consumers, to reach your customers, because we as human beings are beginning to do so much more online than we have ever done before. We live on operating systems. So we live, for example, on Google and Amazon and Microsoft. This is the operating system. So we need to make sure that our inventions that we create as startups are detangled into those operating systems. And when I talk about this, you probably think about the sci-fi Her movie, right? An operating system. And that's the situation today. Share of life is that we live online on an operating system, was defined in a science fiction movie for some years ago. But that's the fact of reality. And that means that when you are a startup, don't create solutions that belong to the past. Create solution in the environment we are in today. So that will be my advice to startups. And then again, if you look at it from a science fiction perspective, the methodology in the book speak about, imagine you live in 2030 or 2050. How will your solution look like? Because that helps people to unlock and don't have all those constraints that you normally have when you ideate on new solutions.
Yeah, those are some really great advice. Thank you so much. And I think, as you said, that anything we build to stability in mind when we are building it, and probably that will solve half of the problem at the creation level itself. And we briefly, you spoke about innovation, and here I would bring probably this concept that you have also spoken about, that is innovation with purpose. And considering that there is sort of depleting natural resources, but the fact that we also, for production in economy, we need natural resources. That's how we produce. We have always been producing. So if I have to ask you that, how do we use this concept of innovation with purpose and marry it to make production more sustainable?
So this is a very interesting question. And if we just kind of split up the wording here and we look at how companies have been implementing technology for years and defining business model and business processes, there was a time where there was limitation to technology, and the focus we had was that we were just thrilled when we had some technology support and we began to consolidate systems, and then there was a time where we began to look into how can we streamline business processes, and this is the old Lean Six Sigma day with operation efficiency, and how can we do all of this? And at this time, it was not because we didn't want to think about purpose, but it was not really embedded into the way we were setting up and creating solutions. But now we then had the last 8 years, I call it the 8 magical years, we have seen an exponential movement around technology, new technology, thinking solutions like blockchain, machine learning, and so on and so forth. They have given us an unlimited opportunity to build something totally different that we did before. So there's been a very big focus on let us build new solution with innovation. So we are going from isolated thinking about what can you do with technology, how can you optimize an efficiency gain, how can you work with innovation, and now we have all this power and all those opportunities, and we can now consolidate that and bring it on and say, okay, we have some really big challenges here in the world to make it equal and good and safe for everybody. The whole purpose that UN is driving. And this is here that purpose is coming in. And that means that it's not like that we need to do things totally in a whole new way, or it just means that when you go in and run a digital transformation in a company, just like you make sure you use the technology in the best, smartest way, you build the business process in the best, smartest, efficient way, you make sure that anything you do, both the output, the way you run it, that you do it in a sustainable, correct way also. And that has not been included so much earlier. So that means that if you create a product, make sure that the fabric of the product is the right way of doing it. When you run an end-to-end supply chain with your partners, make sure that it is done in a correct way also. And that piece have not really been embedded so much before. And going back to the SDG Ambition, we now need to collect data, and that data collection we didn't do before because we didn't really not have to focus on it. If you look at the whole CO2 and the whole discussion about climate 1.5, bringing that in is like a whole new perspective, a whole new view, a whole new data collection. But it doesn't mean that you need to do something in a whole new way. It just means that it needs to be embedded into what you already are doing. Of course, there might need to be new technology functionalities. You need to redefine business processes. You need to collect new type of data set, of course. But this is just, again, to come in to the digital transformation. It's not like you need to run 2 digital transformations. You still just run one, but you do it from a sustainability perspective. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these are some really good suggestions that you suggested, how the companies can probably look at production from a sustainable mindset, and also building product from a sustainable mindset. Now, of course, this is one puzzle. Consumption is another story altogether, because we can't always ask the companies to change, but as consumers, we have to also change ourselves. And on that front, there are a few questions. So let me dive into the first thing that pops up into mind. That food wastage is a huge problem that we all know about. I mean, almost 1.3 billion tons of food worth around $1 trillion ends up rotting in bins of consumers and retailers, or spoiled due to poor transportation or harvesting practices. So would you have some reform suggestions that can be brought about on the service side to make consumption and production of food more responsible?
Yeah. So first of all, it has been great. The last couple of years, we have seen a lot of startups coming up in this space, and where you are helping consumers, you are helping companies who produce food to change the behavior, because we really talk about changing behavior. And the great thing about this topic about food is that, and it's like the chicken and egg, you can say, it's not enough that it is just the consumers who change the habit, or it is the companies who produce food who change the habit. It needs to go both ways. And this is why you can say working with purpose, and in this case around food waste, and the 17 global goals, is that it's becoming personally for every single person. So right now you see people all over the world in their private households, they are literally changing behavior in the way they buy food, the way they prepare food, the way they when they they don't just throw food out. There's a whole new behavior done in the private household around the world. And at the same time, restaurants and bakeries and food companies who produce food are changing. They're putting in new supply chains. There are apps where you can go into a bakery, a grocery store, end of the day, and they hand out foods that they normally would just have been thrown away. So there are tons of, you can say, new ways that is supported by technology. So information is available. I mean, you can get a notification on your app, and you can see where you can go and collect up food. So there are many type of solutions. But the thing is, and that goes for any change that you do, is that if it's not something that you as a consumer like want to be part of or are engaging with, it will never be successful. So the change needs to come from the consumer, and it needs to come from all the different kind of companies who's involved, whatever it's food production or selling food or handing out food, preparing food. This is really an end-to-end. And then there's a whole other dynamic in it, is that there is a geographical perspective in it. We can see with it's not so much about food waste, but it's about how behavior change around food. Now with COVID, we have seen worldwide how restaurants have been closing down, and you couldn't get access to food because you couldn't go into grocery shops. So how ordering food online has become a total normality, how restaurants have become takeaway places. Some of them was not that before. And so it's just interesting to see when we as a consumer, together with the companies producing food, literally changed overnight. And this is what we saw with COVID, and this is what we see also with the whole food waste situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the ecosystem is evolving, and I think companies and sort of the food production as well as the human consumption ecosystem both have to come together and solve the puzzle.
Yeah.
Let's move to another F word, which is fashion. And as it is very well known, and to all the people who probably don't know, that 10% of the greenhouse emissions by human activity comes from the fashion industry. And it's so astounding for me to, that we all contribute on a daily basis to this one industry. We all buy clothes, we all buy so many other things which comes under fashion, and we buy a lot sometimes. So going forward, what would be some of your recommendations or ideas in terms of, as contributors, how change happen to a sustainable fashion?
So fashion is very similar when we look at the whole food situation, because you can say there's so much that stores can do and that companies who produce fashion, but if the consumer don't change behavior, it's not going to affect the end-to-end result of the whole fashion ecosystem. But what we are seeing, and I also actually think that COVID have accelerated this in a big way, is that people are beginning to reuse this whole industry nowadays worldwide around selling selling your different fashion pieces and clothing that you have. There's a whole reusable trend going on around the world. People are also beginning to when they buy, to look at what is the fabric, where was it produced, ask questions to the brands, to the fashion companies who produce fashion. Many fashion companies who are also a member of UN Global Compact are really going in and are redefine production lines, also where do they get their clothing produced. So there is a really close collaboration between the companies who create fabric, to companies producing fashion, to stores, to end-to-end consumers. And we also see now that a lot of companies, for example, if you do at Hennes & Mauritz, for example, you can go in with your used clothes and hand it in the whole recycling. So the fashion industry are moving fast on this. And I think that it is, again, like the whole food ecosystem is a good example on how the ecosystem between the consumer and the fashion, the retailers, really are collaborating on this. I remember for a couple of years ago, I was speaking at UN, and there was a lot of expert in the fashion industry, and it was all again about the upcoming question was about, so who moved first? Is it the consumer, or is it the retailers, or is it the companies who produce the fashion? And somehow it needs to be totally aligned, right? And this is what we see now, also really ramping up worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those insights and things that are happening around in that segment as well. You mentioned that changing behavior is hard, and that's probably one of the toughest thing that stops us from changing. And I studied gamification, and partly it was part of sort of human behavior, and behavioral economics was part of that. And this is we keep saying that, okay, we must build habits habits, and then only the change comes and then turns that into action. But in a larger context, since it is very hard to change consumer behavior, what can we really do? So what I was asking is, since change and building habit is very hard, and then changing is also even more difficult, my question to you is that I think community plays a real big role in building these habits and making change happen. You have built large communities in different organizations. I would love to know from you that what role can community play in making change happen and build or making this consumer behavior change, or if there are some other ideas that you have through which we can, as a consumer, we can change our behaviors.
So I think that it's all about community, because we as individual people, we work best if we belong to a community. And a community has an impact. When you belong to a community, that community have an impact on you and your behavior, because you select a community or the same thing for movement that you believe in and that you want to be associated with. And that is changing your behavior. And right now we see worldwide, not just because of COVID, because that movement was already started, but have been accelerating because of COVID, that people, it's become personally to be purpose-driven. People today, more than ever, live a sustainable life. A lot of people have been forced to change the way they live because of COVID. So we're probably seeing the most massive historically behavior change in people's habits. The whole thing about that we now live online, for example. And then of course it's all about that the new habits that we're incorporating is the right habits. And that's why a lot of people have asked me the question about because of COVID, what about all the other 17 global goals? What about the 10 business benchmark? And I think that COVID have just accelerated our understanding of the importance of all the goals, about don't leave anybody behind. Make sure that you, as whatever you as an individual person or in your working setup or as a mom or dad, your surroundings, that you is an example on a person who live and take decision based on a purpose mindset. So I think right now, from having different communities, right now I think we have the biggest global community that have probably historically ever been, that we all are uniting. And this is why UN, it is amazing with UN now, how it is uniting the world to be a purpose-driven community. And I was recently in Denmark, and if I look at, if I go by school in Denmark, there's advertising around the global goals on the building. If I go, some of the advertisement, that you see when you go to the city is companies speaking about purpose. And so I think what we're experiencing right now, which definitely historically, is that UN have more or less orchestrated in such a beautiful way that whatever you are a child, or you are young, or you are older, or you are, whoever you are, a professional, a human being, we all have joined the purpose movement to build a better world. And so I think to you, I think that's the reason why, yes, a lot of people have been forced to change their behavior because of COVID, but we are not just changing because of COVID, we are changing because it became personally, and we understand that we are only a split second here in this world, and we need to make sure whatever we do here needs to be much better and before the next generation to come.
If only Hans Christian had to write a more purposeful story for us on this.
Yes,
I loved, the examples that you gave. So, thank you. Yeah, he could definitely. I totally agree. Of course, talking about responsible consumption and production. But one question that comes to my mind is that, in many cases, sustainability is expensive. anything, you say organic, or sort of anything that is sustainable or eco, sometimes have turned into this very expensive lifestyle oriented products, which is not really accessible for all. Given that scenario, how do we sort of reclaim that space as, no, sustainability is not expensive, it's not only for the people who can afford it, but it's for all? How do we change that, shift that conversation?
So it's first of all, I think what is happening now is that sustainability came from a place where it was something you did or you did not, or you did partly. And now we're moving in, and this is what the SDG Ambition is about. We're moving into that. It is embedded into everything we do. It's become a normality. It's not something that you can deselect. You live a sustainable life, you build a sustainable business model, you build a sustainable product. It becomes part of everything. And that will then help you to make sure that the price point will be for everybody, because it becomes how it is. It becomes normal, and it becomes the way to do it. And it's interesting when you say this, because I remember when I lived in Denmark, because organic and sustainability, Denmark is #1 in the world on the SDGs. And being organic and sustainable is part of the DNA of every single Dane. And it did not start in 2015 with the 17 Global Goals. It's part of our history. It's part of who we are as Danes. And I remember when I moved to US, and it was like, oh, do you want organic coffee? And I was like, what do you mean by I want organic coffee? Because in Denmark, you will never write it, because it was already part of it, right? So I think we go from that it is something that is just embedded into every single thing, and it's become, that's the only way. And that would then make it accessible and affordable, because there's no other way to do it. And that's the shift we see in the world now. Yeah.
Great. And I think, one of the ways to do it is also to educate the next generation, and sort of mold and shape their minds and ideas to make them understand what sustainable living means, what sustainable consumption means from a very young age, so that they can make the change happen.
Yeah.
And you have been also part of multiple programs where you have interacted with young people and developed course and frameworks for them as well. So could you tell us a little bit about, going forward, how do we take sustainability education, which is focused on responsible consumption and production for young minds? How do we encourage them?
Yeah, so the last many years, I've been working with more than 4,000 universities and schools around the world in 119 countries. And right now I'm working with TGALF, where we are building up a whole entrepreneurship sports generation for youth and young, and accelerate the mindsets. And as it was already mentioned earlier, the youth mindsets is the mindsets that we need to come up with new ideas, but it's also the generation that is coming, who is in the world and who will be a long time in the world. So the world we are building now is for the young generation, and their voices need to be heard. Their ideations and ideas need to be heard and need to be implemented. And I think the interesting thing when we look at technologies, if you look at how 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years are using the technology of today, just using social media, using devices, you can already see a different way of how technology is being used and supporting their daily life. And this is just accelerating. And now with the 17 global goals and the business benchmarks, and where, there's a lot at stake here. And we talk about how much we need to get solved by 2030, which is only 10 years. We need to make sure that the young generation, the youth all over the world, are part of creating the solution that we need right now. It cannot just be people who are in the private sector now or in government now. No, we need, and what I've always been fascinated by, on top of that, I've been working with more than 4,000 universities around the world and different nationalities. I'm fascinated by how schools and universities, this is this back to science fiction, this is this playfulness, because often when you enter into the private world, into the corporations, the playfulness disappear. And if you want to come up with bold new ideas with a science fiction mindset, you need playfulness. You need to try out things. So right now for me, I'm looking at the youth. I'm looking at the whole entrepreneurship mindset worldwide. And I'm looking at how they're going to accelerate and inject new ideas into the private sector and government, this public-private partnerships. So it is. So this is why I'm super excited about what we're doing right now with TICLEF, really to build this huge entrepreneurship, using the philosophy of sport, like orchestrate that across the world and really accelerate the mind of youth.
Wow, this really sounds good, and also it's pretty close to my heart, considering that I believe curiosity is one of the most important of the 21st century skills, and innovation probably comes along with curiosity, and I'm really glad to see that how you are sort of accelerating these young minds to take action and make change happen. But this sounds really good, so I would need to know a little bit more about what is this entrepreneurship sports generation? What is it about, and how are we going to bring all the youth together and make it happen?
So
what are your
what
ideas?
we're doing now with TICLEF and this whole ESG, the enterprise entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship sports generation, is that we are using the, if you look into the sports world, the sport have, globally huge contests going on that you do on local level, regional level, and global level, right? And you have this whole thing about the winning, like we spoke about before. And when we go into the whole philosophy of winning, you want to win for the right reason, and it's about the team spirit, and it's about performing the best you can, right? So that's the whole way of the sports philosophy into this. And then what we are doing, we are literally calling out all the big tech companies of the world to come in with the greatest, latest technology. We are calling out, all the big corporations of the world to collaborate and be receivable on great new ideas coming from youth. We are ramping up and teaming up with universities and schools worldwide to be part of this contest. So we do it in a collective way, and also, again, linked to the whole UN mindset about we are doing it in a united way. And we are coming up with solutions up against the 17 global goals to help and build a better world for humanity. But it is based on this mindset of youth. And as it was said earlier, it's not just great ideas. We're actually going to come up with solutions and a public-private partnership with the private sector, so they will be implemented. So that's the whole idea. So we are right now ramping up this huge network, and it will go from now and into 2021. So there will be much more information. So I invite everybody listening into this to join us and be part of this movement.
Yeah, I mean, we would be happy to be a part of it. And in fact, for your knowledge, we have, as a part of this conclave, as a celebration of the Global Goals Week, we have launched an global SDG quiz, which people from different universities, including Princeton, Oxford, and even here in India and Malaysia and different places, they are participating, and we're getting a great response. And I think one of the key ways is to, as you said, generate awareness and give them a framework to act on, so that they can build ideas and make things happen. So I'm glad to know about your initiative, and everybody who is listening in and joining in would, of course, check this out. We will put a link on the video when you have them, and we'll share it with everyone else. Thank you so much. And at this point, I have, before I go to a younger voice for probably the tougher questions, I have one more question for you here, and that is, if I have to ask you for a blueprint of what the future would probably look like when it comes to sustainability or sustainable consumption and production, what would be some of your top ideas or recommendations?
First of all, I know a lot of people out there are concerned right now because of COVID, and I think we need to look into the future with a lot of hope. And that's why I brought in Share of Life, that we live online today. Doesn't mean that we're not going to see each other, for sure we are, but we have changed the way, and we live online. And it's not because of COVID, because it has been here for some time, but we have now we now understand because we are all doing it now. Secondly, so embrace this and see the opportunity in this. Secondly, I think that we all need in our behavior, consumer behavior, need to take our own personal responsibility to be living sustainable. And that means that the way we prepare our food, the way we do grocery shopping, the way we buy clothing, the way we live our life in general, and what we require from the companies where we buy from. And then I think more in a bigger setting for the corporations, I think that with the SDG Ambition, I mean, sustainability needs to be the core of the strategy. It needs to be what it is now for many, many companies, and it needs to be a normality on how we drive transformations and build new business ideas and products and solutions and so on. And then the last thing I want to say, we live in a time today where it's all about public-private partnerships. And we all have responsibility and need to contribute. I normally always talk about my invisible backpack. It's more or less, I have an invisible backpack, and in that backpack, everything I have there, everything I do every single day, I do it, of course, for my loved ones, and I do it to serve United Nations. That's how I look at it, and that's really how I see the world. We need to support as we can, as we are as human beings, the best possible way for a better humanity, and don't leave anybody behind. And this is exactly what UN is orchestrating. So that's probably what I will give as advice.
Wow. I would, from now on, I will keep that backpack story and analogy in mind. Thank you so much for giving us that. Well, it's time to hear a younger voice, and I have Arushi, a young student from India, who has a couple of questions for you. So Arushi, please introduce yourself and ask your questions.
First of all, ma'am, it's been a really insightful session up till now. And I'm a student of economics honors from the Delhi University. And what I feel is, first we have to create a ripple at a more personal level, which then may manifest into a wave. So, coming to the questions, as you mentioned, you have a background in entrepreneurship, sports organization. So, I wanted to know what tools or methods you can use to mold the younger generations for a more sustainable tomorrow, and also how we can, on an operational level, get involved in this.
So, the first one, if you look at tools and content, with this initiative with ESG, with Conclave, we have a platform that we are rolling out where the contest will take place on, and the contest will be broadcasted from. We will have an infrastructure, so we are also calling out students to participate, but also students who want to be actually run chapters in their local countries and on their universities. So you can really run your own chapter. We already have young people all over the world. We're looking for many more to join. And then, of course, so there's a whole like infrastructure on the whole organization of this. And then, of course, there is enablement like learning content, technology solutions that can be used for building solutions. And of course, then we have a whole rewarding system. But what is interesting about the rewarding system is really a rewarding system that can enable you to take it to the next level. For example, become part of an accelerator, go in and get consulting support by one of the consulting companies, go in and team up with a corporation to get your solution implemented. So we go the whole long way with this. And this is, so for me, I mean, I have been doing, I think, 2,000 events per year for many, many years, and hackathon, Code James, Inyo James, and all this stuff. And what always have been the trouble for me was that so many great ideas, but they were never really match-made into a setup where they could become something and could do impact. So what we're doing with ESG is that we are literally making sure that the ideas really drive impact. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer, ma'am. Since I have a background in economics, I'm really willing to work towards goal 12. So can you tell us three things that the youth can take on a personal level for a more responsible consumption and production?
I think for the youth generation, and that's why you probably heard this before, UN also call the young generation that the ESG generation. And you guys are the change makers. So the first thing I want you to take on is to become an expert. And you're already on your way and becoming that, because you are getting educated at a very early stage. You get trained on it. You get trained in a way that it's become a normality for you. You will even realize this is what I think purpose do to human being. In the beginning, you kind of begin to, oh, that's nice, that makes sense. But then it gets you a way that you totally change your mind, and it become like who you are, and you can't do it differently, right? So you could say the first thing is to get trained, know how to do something about it, get engaged, like you already engaged here, get engaged into activities with UN, with the government, with the university, this whole public-private partnership mindset. So learn about it and get engaged. Secondly, when you then begin to work with companies, whatever it is, project doing collaboration at your school, internships, when you get out into full-time positions, be the change agent. Ask the difficult questions. And I actually think it will surprise many young people, because you literally, and this is what I thank the university world for, and also UN has some really strong programs for schools like Prime with UN Global Compact and others, is that you are thinking very differently, but you think the new way. So go ask the difficult questions about why is the supply chain not sustainable? Why is the product that is produced, why are the plastic involved? Whatever the question is, why is that fashion line created with that type of fabric? Ask those questions. And then the third thing is, which you an incredible example on, be an activist, but always a positive activist. No matter where you go, bring up the conversation, whatever is a dinner party, it is grocery shopping, it is at school, at your internship with friends. Bring up the conversation, be an activist, be a thought leader, right? So that's the three things. So enable yourself, be super at it, be a change maker when you go out and work the private sector or governance, and then be an activist and a person, a thought leader on it. I think that's the three things. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Arushi, for your questions. And thank you so much for such a beautiful and insightful session. It's very difficult for me to sum up when so much insight is packed into a session, but as a host, I'll try my best. For everyone who is listening in and joining in, as Anne suggested, develop the science fiction mindset to unlock the true potentials. And it's not for just individuals, but all the companies as well, and startups out there, because that's where the potential of the future lies. So bring on that science fiction mindset. For the next generation who is building new things, remember that anything we build, we need to incorporate sustainability into it. Always innovate with purpose, and we need to relook at the way we live, think more sustainably, and act more sustainably. Public-private partnerships are more important than ever. More importantly, everyone who is young and the next generation, go and ask the difficult questions and bring up the conversation in the parties and in the in school, in everywhere else where you are going. Probably that's the only way we will be able to unite the world to be a purpose-driven community. Thank you, Anne, once again for being here. But before I conclude the session, since I am a quiz master and I never run out of questions, here is one last question to you. If you have to sum up your vision for a better world in one sentence, what would that be?
It will be, don't leave anybody behind. Because if we don't leave anybody behind, I come from a country, Denmark, where we don't leave anybody behind. That's taking care of every single person. And I believe that that's the way that we can make a better world for every single person on this planet. So I think that's how I think about it. Yeah.
On that note, for everyone who is listening in and joining in, remember, as Anne said, for a world where no one is left behind, it has never been clearer that all of us have a role to play in order to bring about change. Whoever you are, no matter where you come from, every one of us can make a difference. Every action truly counts. Get involved. Attend the SDG Action Conclave 2020. Participate in the SDG quiz. Help raise awareness about the goals and connect with a global community of passionate volunteers. This Global Goals Week, let us all come together to spread the knowledge about people, planet, and our sustainable development goals. Thank you once again all for joining us. Follow us on Instagram at Youth Forum India for all the updates. And don't forget to join our next session. And thank you so much once again for being here. It was an honor speaking to you and learning from you.